Alright, so what I'm going to be throwing now is a rimmed plate. And what I mean by rimmed is just that it has that little outside rim, kind of a traditional plate, not just brought up a trough like I did in the Throne Plate Smith video. Those are a little bit more modern in my opinion, or at least currently, but this type of plate is a little bit more old school. The outside rim does take up space and doesn't serve a whole lot of purpose other than kind of stacking your food onto it, from what I can think of at least. So as always, pack it on here, get it semi-centered even before I start. This I'm going to center pretty low because I'm going to end up squatting everything down. So I don't cone up quite as high as usual. I do cone a little bit, but just basically that's as high as I want to go. You can see that little wobble because I'm leaving my elbow out. Apologize for the messy wheel. I've seen a few comments about the messy wheel. Wish I cared more, to be honest, but I make a lot of videos consecutively, so. Okay, so now I'm going to open outward, and I'm going to open pretty wide. This bat is exactly 12 inches across. So I'm going to open almost all the way out. I will open all the way out, but once I start squeezing to pull up, it'll go in just a little bit. So just want to make sure I'm centered before I go. And I'm going to go down a little more than a 1/4 inch, or leaving a little more than a 1/4 inch, because I do want to trim a foot on this rimmed plate. I do like a foot on it. Sometimes I'll do a double foot. What happens when you open that wide is sometimes when it heats and expands in the kiln, the bottom will touch down on the shelf, and then as it cools, it'll pull back up, but it'll leave residual sharpness of clay, and I don't like that. So sometimes I'll not only trim a foot on the outside, but I'll also put either a little dot in the middle or leave a tiny little foot on the inside as well. Trying to keep this as level as possible. I'll do some leveling later too. Slow down just a little bit. Give me a little bit more control. I'll come back and compress this in a moment. But I'm going to go all the way out to the edge here. And you can start to see like a hump here, which I need to level out as well. Just my thought process as I throw. Okay, so now I'm almost all the way out to the bat edge. There we go. And this is a pretty big plate, to be honest. I usually throw about a 10-inch plate. This is 12 inches currently, but it'll be a little bit less in just a minute. So right now I'm compressing just for the sake of S-cracks, or to prevent the S-cracks. But this isn't actually flattening it. It's got a little hump here and it slowly slumps down in the middle there. But I'll take a wooden rib, and you can see, so I put the corner here in the middle, but you can see, like right now it's only hitting from here to here. So that means down here is lower. So I'll push until it's nice and flat, working my way slowly towards the outside. And right now you can see it's making a little line for me. I actually like that line sometimes for the sake of aesthetics. But if you don't want that line in there, just stop like at this point. And you can still see that slant in this area. There's still water there, so I haven't gotten down far enough there. Just a bit of water. And notice I'm tilting my rib the way the wheel's spinning. I don't want to go against it, against the grain. I'm just going to keep pressure on it until that line right there goes away. And then I go back across to make sure it's nice and level. Okay, I'll kind of get rid of that line just by default because I'm about to pull this wall up. So just by me pushing my finger in here, that line will go away, but you can always bring it back with going over the rib or with the rib again. So right here is where my bat is. My clay is almost matched up to it, and I'm gonna get in there and I'm gonna squeeze and just do a little pull. This first one's just to kind of get my wall nice and even, not just a big bead of clay. Next pull, I'm gonna pull like I would naturally. Get some of this clay off my hands. A little bit of water, not too much. Especially on something out here when I start to apply it, pressure on it to go out and go past what we call the fulcrum. You don't want to have too much water on it. Right now it doesn't really matter because I'm just pulling. Okay, so I go down here and I'm going to squeeze that clay in there. Now I'm going to bring it out at a little bit of an angle this time. Okay, I want to keep that lip nice and thick, so I'll compress it. Just to err on the side of caution. Get some of that water out of there. I'm also going to go for a little style point here. A little swirl. I was going to just go ahead and bring it out, but that wall's a little thick for me. I'm going to do one more little squeeze, get all that clay in there, use as much clay as I possibly can. Okay. And anytime, and this is a pretty small wall, but anytime you're bringing clay out, that wall, or the lip, excuse me, should be a little bit thick, because it's going to thin out when I take it outside or bring it outward. So I can use any rib for this, whether it's wood, metal, does not matter. If I just want, like this plate I showed earlier as the example, if I just want this slant, I would keep the point of my wooden rib or my metal rib on the inside. But this one I want this to be the trough area and then the rim just to be kind of an extra. So I'm going to start a little bit further out, so you really can't see on this side, but I would be here instead of down here at the bottom. If I just wanted to come out, I would just tilt this out, but I would leave this here. But I'm going to go up a little bit, and you'll see on the other side, the opposing side. But I'm just going to slowly start tilting my tool out. And again, that's why we took a little bit of the water off. I don't want this to flop onto my wheel. I don't like a too sharp of an edge here. I could make a sharp edge if I really wanted one. Oops, I got a chunk in there. But you can do any number of things. Sometimes I just use my finger right there because it's rounded, and I'll make that little trough. Sometimes if I want it sharp, I can use the rib. I feel like that's a little too pronounced for my liking or for my intentions function-wise. So I'm going to take my sponge and my finger, first finger. I'm going to kind of round that out just so it's easier to use your fork for whatever purpose it is. Then I'm going to bring that wall up just a little bit. I went out a little too far. So I'm just gonna go underneath and scoop back up just a little bit. Right. There's good, and I'll just clean that lip up as I knock it off center. Okay, and there we have a rimmed plate. Again, if you don't want that little swirl on the inside, you can always flatten it back out if you want to. In this case, I like it for style points. I cut this while it's still wet. Absolutely cut it, but then I would either heat cut it for a little bit. I don't want it to dry unevenly because it lends to more S-cracks. But I want it to dry for a couple hours, but definitely cut it early. Otherwise, you tend to cut into your fingers with the cutting wire. But you cut it, leave it, no water or anything like that. Just cut it the way it is. Let it dry for a little bit, and then we can take it off. In my case, I have a bat system, so I can just take the bat off and set it aside and make more plates. So that is the rimmed plate.